Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to this LinkedIn Live with me, Justin York, where today we're going to talk about what does good look like in your data ecosystem. So for the next 20-25 minutes, we'll explore a little bit about what good looks like, some of the challenges or impacts that you might get from trying to understand what good looks like in your data ecosystem, because it will be different for quite a lot of people, and how we can link these sort of problems to, or the issues that we see in our data ecosystems, to behaviors of people. Now, your data ecosystem is going to be your core foundation of everything that you do in your organization. Large or small, you'll have a data ecosystem, and the data that you're using contained in that ecosystem will be fundamental to what it is that you do. So the idea is, or the concept around what does good look like, is it's very difficult to move towards good if you've never defined what it is. And most organizations are really good at reacting to issues. So an issue pops up and they go and sort that issue out. It's a bit like firefighting. A fire starts, somebody calls the fire brigade, they come along and put it out. You turn around, another fire started. You turn around, another fire started. So you rush around putting out fires. Or they're very good at fixing problems. So organizations are great at reacting to the issues, but also to fixing those things. So not fixing them in a permanent sense, but fixing them to get by, to put sticking plasters on things, to have workarounds or tactical fixes just to get the job done. Lots of people, the heroes and heroines of organizations, are working really hard, and they work really hard, and a lot of their time is spent doing little fixes that are not necessarily theirs to resolve. And organizations will also invest in a lot of tooling. Tooling in data is essential these days, particularly if you're in a large organization, because you're dealing with so much data that without tools, you simply would have no chance of controlling it or managing it. So tooling is an absolute essential. However, inside your organization, if you don't have a shared view of what good looks like, then you sort of have a problem, because it will mean many different things to many different people. So if you were to ask 10 people in your organization what good looked like, you would probably get 10 different answers. And even if they answered the same way, there will be nuances in their answers, because their perspectives on what good looks like is different. So it depends where you're coming from. What's the data being used for? What type of level is it in the organization that you are asking? So you might get answers like, is it accuracy? It's accuracy. Okay, great. So you want the data to be accurate, but what does that actually mean? Because unless somebody has defined the standard of what accurate is, or what makes the data fit for purpose, how can you know whether it's accurate? You won't know. You'll just get data. So unless you've got something in there that says this data has been fully tested and is confirmed to be accurate as per the standards that have been defined, then you wouldn't know it's accurate. But people will have that view that they say accuracy is a key thing. Or maybe it's speed. Everybody wants everything instantly these days. Everything has to be done yesterday. People want instant return on investment. People want jobs doing immediately. People want to jump priorities. They want to put everything at a high priority. And of course, the problem with doing everything at a high priority is that something is high priority, something's high priority, but slightly less than a high priority. So priorities and speed are different things, but people may want to say, well, what does speed mean? Because if, for me, it might be if I can get it within 20 minutes of asking the question, that'll be great. For some people, they might say in terms of speed, well, I want it within 30 seconds, or I want it within 10 seconds, or I want it instantaneously. So speed, some people might say speed. And other people might say, well, actually, I want to be able to trust it. I want to have a lot of confidence in it. You think, well, okay, we want to be confident in the data and trust it so that we can use it straight away. So assuming if we have trust, what things would have to go into that? Well, some things that would have to go into it would be, we have to be accurate. The data has to be accurate. It has to meet a certain standard. If you've got a report to put in tomorrow and you get the data at 12 o'clock today, then, speed is going to be important. But trust, being able to look at the data and say, that looks good to me, or I can trust the mechanism it's gone through, is essential for a lot of people. Because without that, we're just going to rework. We're going to double check, triple check. We're going to go back and ask and say, well, is this number real? What calculations did we use? What tests have we done to make sure that it's okay? And the key thing about all of this is that if we can't agree on what good looks like, well, how can we understand whether we've reached good or not? So a lot of organizations, a lot of the focus is on fixing those issues, reducing risk. But fixing issues is fine. As long as we're fixing them permanently, that's okay. If we're not fixing them permanently and we're just putting sticking plasters on and we've got these little workarounds and tactical fixes, then sure, we fix the issue, but we're only fixing a symptom of what we see. And reducing risk, yeah, it could be reducing risks. You could be creating risks elsewhere by taking your workarounds or your tactical fixes or your little bits of sticking plaster you put across things. But a lot of focus is not on defining success. So we spend more time reacting to the problems and the issues than we do defining what we are aiming for. And that's what we need to define. What does good look like in your data ecosystem? So I've got here, I'm going to go through 5 characteristics of things that will look good in a data ecosystem. And we're going to start with clarity. So when I talk about clarity, we're talking about, do people understand what the data means? So I'll give you an example that I've used before, but in a pharmaceutical, I was in a meeting and they were talking about APIs. And I was thinking to myself, application programming interfaces. Well, that's interesting, but it doesn't really fit with this meeting. And then somebody said, well, actually, what we're talking about is active pharmaceutical ingredients. And go, oh, right, okay, still API. So when I asked them about the definitions of those things and said, do we understand what that means? Because I clearly didn't understand what the use of API was in that meeting, in that context, because I had not been in those meetings before. And they said, well, no. They said, well, it must be defined in the glossary. No. So we're using things which we haven't defined. So people have to understand, what does the data mean? But not only do they have to understand that, they also have to understand how it can be used. So when you look at data and you look at its meaning, sometimes you look at things and go, well, actually, that's probably all right. So there's another example. Last week, I saw on LinkedIn somebody talking about bi-weekly. Bi-weekly can mean twice a week, or it can mean once every 2 weeks. So what does that mean? If we just use bi-weekly without the context, then it could mean either of those things. So what we might have to do is say, well, if we're talking about HR, they're talking about it being every 2 weeks. If we're talking about finance, they're talking about twice a week. So we have to have that level of context. And so the definitions that we are using have to be well defined, but they also have to be consistent in how they're used across the organization. Because what we're looking for is the same pieces of data that we're using and the same levels of understanding about that data. So the second thing we're going to talk about is ownership. Owners are people that are accountable for sets of data in an organization. So as an example, in HR, you might have 3 sets of data. So you might have something like executive data, employee data, or third-party data that you are holding and using, controlling inside the HR systems. But somebody will have to be the owner of that. Somebody has to be accountable for that data. So whoever that is in your organization, in the frameworks or structures, it could be the data owner or the data domain owner for HR. They'll be accountable for it. So they'll be accountable for all of that data, regardless of which sort of segment it's in. You may have data stewards in data governance parlance who will look after each one of those segments as subject matter experts, but it's the data owner that is accountable. Now, accountability comes with the ability to make decisions on that data. Who should be using it? What can the data be used for? What am I approving this access to? It also comes with the ability to apply resource, to make decisions and say, well, we need to permanently fix this piece of data in a source system, and I'm going to apply some resource to that in order to get that done. So they make those kind of decisions. And when you've got people that are accountable and they understand their role and they're employing it really well, then problems don't just drift, they get resolved. Without accountability, people are arguing, they're passing it around saying, well, it's not me, it's them, no, it's not me, it's you, so on and so forth. But accountability comes with that ability to make those kind of decisions. The next thing we're going to talk about is flow. We're going to talk about how data moves across processes. So data, as it's moving through the organization, may move across several processes. So it might come out of a creation process where people are putting it into a system. It then moves into something where we might have analysis of that data. So it's another process that we go through. And the key thing about processes is that the data is there to support the work we're doing. It's not there to get in the way. And so we need the frameworks and structures in our ecosystem and the controls and processes, those types of things, in order to have minimal friction when we're using the data. If we have a lot of friction, things flowing across, they don't get handed over correctly or smoothly. There's no particular handoff for it, so people don't understand where it came from, what's happened to it, that kind of thing. Then we end up with friction. We don't want friction. We want smooth moving across the processes. The smoother thing moves, the more the data supports the work. It's not slowing it down. Because one of the key things about controls or data governance and data management in organizations is it just slows us down. It shouldn't be doing that. It should be moving smoothly. We should understand the processes and how it moves between them. Because when it does that, then we get that minimal friction. The fourth thing I'm going to talk about is visibility. We need to know how that data is moving end to end. One of the things I've talked about before is the 6 things that we need to understand about our data. So we need to understand, what have we got, where is it, how does it move around, who's using it, what for, who owns it, and what's the quality of it. So when we're talking about visibility, we're talking about the moving part. How does it move? And it may move from a source system. It may then move into a warehouse or a data lake. And it may move from there into some kind of visualization tool. And from there, it's in a dashboard that gets presented. So it's moved through various phases. And on its journey, things will be happening to it. So when it gets loaded into a warehouse, there may be some kind of process that's used. When it's getting loaded, there may be some kind of transformations. And it's really important that we understand how the data moves. What is the lineage of that data? Because if we don't have the lineage, then we don't have the dependencies. If we don't have the dependencies, then it's very difficult for us in terms of process and reviewing process, or maybe looking at data quality issues, to understand what's happened to that data on its journey. An example, working in an organization, we had a file left, a source system that contained 18 fields. Only 12 arrived in the warehouse. So 6 have gone missing somewhere. So we checked all the logic of the ETL, and none of it was removing anything. So we checked the file, left the source system, had 18 fields in it. When the file was loaded to the warehouse, as it was opened, it only had 12. We thought, oh, that's a bit odd. So when we looked at the code in Python, what we found was that there's a piece of logic in there that somebody had put in for whatever reason, was taking out 6 fields, which is interesting, but we didn't know why it was happening. And that then starts to upset the dependencies. It starts to upset the process and the logic and our understanding of what is happening with the data. So we need to know how it moves. We need the visibility, because if we have visibility, then we're removing the surprises. We're taking out the guesswork, and we're working with things that we know to be factual. And the last thing, the fifth thing, is we're going to talk about is trust. People rely on the data. People want to get data from a system. They want to put it into a dashboard. They want to do the minimal amount of work that they have to do to that, fixing things and that kind of stuff. They want to be able to trust the number that's come out. They want to know how that data has moved through the system, what the flow of it was across the processes, what standards have been applied to it, what tests have been done as defined by an owner. So we need to understand those things. Because the more that we have trust in the data, the less validation and the less rework we have to do when we consume it. Now, everybody has a responsibility with data. When you get a set of data, you should be checking to see it's the right stuff. Is it fit for purpose? I've mentioned before I worked in an organization where a file was taken out of a directory on a Monday morning, but the data wasn't very good. And we said, well, where did that come from? They said, well, it gets put into that folder on a Friday. Well, who does that? Don't know. Where does it come from? No idea. What constraints or standards have been applied to it? Don't know. It's just never right. So it's really important that we can trust that. Because if we trust the data and we can rely on it, we're doing less validation. We're not going back to check. We're doing less rework. We're not having to do those little tactical fixes. And if we trust the data and we can rely on it, then confidence replaces doubt. And that makes everything a bit quicker. So the next thing we have to think about, so having all those 5 things that we've spoken about, clarity, ownership, flow, visibility, and trust, it's leading us to the idea that if we've got all those things in place, we're going to be in a really good, perfect place. But good isn't about perfect. Good is about consistent, understood, and trusted. That's what that is about. We're not talking about having 0 issues. We're talking about the issues being understood, what's caused them, and getting them resolved correctly. Getting them fixed properly, applying the right levels of resource to these things. And don't forget that in a data ecosystem, when we ask somebody what does good look like, their perspectives are going to play into these things. So some people might say, well, I want it to be accurate. Fine. Doesn't mean it has to be perfect. Just means to have to say that any of the critical issues we've resolved. And we know about the other issues and we know about the risks. And we're going to get on to fixing those things. But it doesn't have to all be done at the same time. I mean, if it is a super critical piece of data, then you might spend more time on that, and you should spend more time on that than you would on something that is not quite as important. So as a reflective question for you to think about, you might think when you get back to work, you might think to yourself, well, which of these things have we got today? Have we got any of them? There'll probably be some of them in there. Well, you might say, of that list of 5 things, which one's missing? Which ones have we not got? What things are missing that people think might be making their data ecosystem good? Because what we need to do is think about these things. We have to think about which things are we seeing? What is the ecosystem telling us? And then what we need to do, if we have a practical issue that we can find that we need to address, we need to look across that issue. And we may want to apply thinking about what does good look like We may want to apply the values of clarity or ownership or flow or visibility or trust. Because if we can improve clarity when we look at an issue, then that's going to be good for everybody. If we define the definition, we make the definition a little bit better, a little bit clearer, that's going to be good. If we can strengthen the ownership by saying to somebody, well, this isn't working very well, and the owner picks it up and says, well, actually, what we can do is I can apply a different standard, or I can check it more often, or whatever it is that they decide to do. Or we may need to increase visibility. We may need to say, well, there's a big section in this process where we can't see where the data is, what happens to the data. So we may need to do some work on that. The thing is that the smaller issues that we pick up, we can provide impact by fixing those things. There's no point trying to fix everything, because if you do, boiling the ocean just doesn't work. So we need to fix something, demonstrate some value for the organization, and they will start to engage and be more interested in what's happening. But good doesn't happen by accident. It's designed, it's understood, and it's maintained. But all of the things I've spoken about here today are behavioral problems with people. People will make shortcuts. They will take or create workarounds. They will save themselves some time. It's a bit like water. They take the path of least resistance, but they don't always report the issues that are going on. And if they don't understand the importance of doing those things, then they won't do them. So people need to understand in a data literacy perspective, well, this data that I'm creating or using or passing further down the pipe to be used somewhere else, what's the impact if it's not accurate? What's the impact on somebody else if I don't take responsibility and make sure it's right? So in the last 22 minutes or so, we've had a bit of a canter through what does good look like in your data ecosystem. We discussed a couple of the things that you might think about, the fact organizations are great at fixing things and doing that kind of stuff. That the idea is that you could ask 10 different people, what does good look like? And you'll get a whole load of different answers. Accuracy, reliability, trust. I looked at 5 characteristics of what you might think about makes a data ecosystem good. Remember, we spoke about clarity, ownership, flow, visibility, and trust in the data. But in order to get an understanding of what does good look like across an organization, we have to raise it up to a fairly high level. And we have to understand that it's not going to happen by accident. We have to design it, understand it, and maintain it. And when we are doing that, then we start to understand what good looks like. And when we've got an idea of what good looks like, then we can move towards it. Because until you define that, then you cannot get to it. So that's all I have this afternoon on what does good look like in your data ecosystem. If anybody's got any questions, please do put them in the comments, and I'll certainly see if I can answer those now. If you don't have any questions, if you think of one later, then DM me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. I have that diagnostic tool available where you can have a look at how your ecosystem's doing and what pointers you might have to go towards it. And if you'd like a link to that scorecard, that diagnostic tool, then please do put diagnostic in the comments and I'll make sure you get a link. So if there's nothing else from anybody this afternoon, then all that remains for me to say is thank you very much for your attendance this afternoon. And I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.